Welcome to the party. You found the Mouse Castle Lounge, the place to be for good times and great conversations from the world of Disney. The bar is open, your table is waiting, and drinks are now being served. Come on in. And now, here's your host, the keeper of the Mouse Castle Lounge, Tim Calloway.
Welcome to the lounge. It's February 6th, 2016, and I'm Tim Calloway. What a terrific show we've got for you today. My guest is historian and author Garry Apgar, talking about his new book, Mickey Mouse, Emblem of the American Spirit. And speaking of spirits, we're introducing a new segment in the lounge today devoted to the wonderful world of cocktails. You're going to love meeting our new master mixologist, Carolyn. But first, raise your glass to Team Mouse Castle and follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/The Mouse Castle. On Twitter, I am Disney Tim, and The Mouse Castle is also on Tumblr, Pinterest, and Instagram. Share your questions and comments by emailing us at podcast@themousecastle.com or call our listener line at 702-475-5MCL. That's 702-475-5625. And of course, you can always visit the blog at themousecastle.com, where you can download the free Mouse Castle Lounge app for your mobile device. Just click the pic that says, "Get the app." It's my pleasure to welcome back Garry Apgar to the Mouse Castle Lounge. In 2014, Garry compiled the book, A Mickey Mouse Reader, an impressive collection of essays and articles spanning more than 80 years that bore witness to the immense popularity of Mickey Mouse and the impact Walt Disney's creation had on popular culture. Garry revisits the Eternal Mouse once again in his latest book, Mickey Mouse, Emblem of the American Spirit. It's a worthy companion to A Mickey Mouse Reader and an educated and thoughtful study in words and pictures, not only of Mickey's life within the Walt Disney Studios, but also his ever-changing presence as a uniquely American cultural icon. After my conversation with Garry, stick around for a new segment in the lounge with our friend Carolyn. She knows a lot about cocktails, and she's going to start sharing her wisdom with us on a regular basis. That's a little later, though. Right now, please welcome Garry Apgar, my guest today in the Mouse Castle Lounge. With me right now is author and historian Garry Apgar. How you doing today, Garry?
Hi, Tim. Good to talk to you.
You know, this is, I guess, becoming a tradition for us. We get together like every year or so. It's been just a little over a year since we last talked, but we get together and we talk about Mickey Mouse. It's not a bad thing.
Right.
When first we talked, and that was, like I said, a little over a year ago, we were talking about your book, The Mickey Mouse Reader, which was a compilation of essays and articles that had been written over the decades around Mickey Mouse. Now you've come out with what I think is just a wonderful companion piece to the book. I think these two books together give you as much insight into Mickey Mouse as you could ever imagine. But your current book, Mickey Mouse, Emblem of the American Spirit, thoroughly enjoyed it. But let me ask you, as these two books together, I mean, was this what you initially set out to do, or did one just kind of spring out from the other?
The new book, the Emblem of the American Spirit book, was my original project. And the Mickey Mouse Reader is an outgrowth of that, because as I collected material over the years, I had, books on my bookshelf, but also articles in file folders, and eventually started transcribing or downloading off the internet, tons and tons of articles and references and images that I archived. And I got, I don't know how many thousands of words. And I had to do it because, especially if I could put it into Word format, or even PDF, you can search it on your computer, because you'd forget what my work said at such time or so forth. So that's what I did, and then it occurred to me in the course of doing the other book that might make a good reader. An anthology might make a good project. So I proposed it to the University of Northern Mississippi, and they bought it, and we got generous funding from Diane Disney Miller and the Walt Disney Family Foundation to do it. And they do go together nicely, but I was trying to make available a lot of the raw material that I found for future scholars, but also for just people interested in Mickey.
Now, talk a little bit about that, too. You had a good relationship with Diane Disney Miller, and Mickey Mouse, Emblem of the American Spirit is published by the Walt Disney Family Foundation Press. How integral was Diane to the publication of your books?
Well, she was absolutely essential. The book, I say this a little bit on the back page of the emblem. on the acknowledgments page, where originally the book was informally accepted by the Yale University Press, which is partly why it reads a bit like somewhat of a scholarly book, because there are lots of endnotes and bibliography, so that ipso facto makes it serious, right? But that hung fire with Yale Press for quite a while, and then eventually they dropped it. And if it weren't for Diane Miller, whom I met quite by accident, just a stroke of good fortune, who immediately said, I got to do this. We got to publish this book. And then she stuck with it. The book would never have come out, I think. Maybe I would have found another publisher. I think Yale may have been, without saying so, daunted by having to deal with the Disney company, because you have to get their cooperation, you have to get permission to use images, and that's always dicey. And maybe another publisher would have been interested, but it wasn't by any means assured that they would. And because of Diane and her name, I think we were able to get more cooperation than would have been possible with anyone else. And of course, the Walt Disney Family Foundation owns a lot of really great stuff, which is in the book. I think that's one of the things I try to do with the book. There are a lot of things I try to do, but to showcase some of their amazing holdings. So Diane was capital. She was key.
On the cover of your book, obviously you had a lot of support from the museum and also from the Walt Disney Company through the archives and the Animation Research Library and what have you. But on the cover of your book is the very well-known, very famous art print of Mickey Mouse by Andy Warhol. So this book really is not just Mickey Mouse within the confines of Disney, but it's Mickey Mouse in the great expanse of popular culture.
In all his iconic glory. Yeah. I'm an art historian, and I was a cartoonist, so I love that kind of stuff. And a couple of the chapters in the book are devoted primarily to Mickey's connections with high art or high culture. Of course, a big chunk of it is how Mickey was created, and so there's several levels to the story. But I think that Warhol image, and I say in the introduction and later on near the end, to me, that Mickey, which is of course based on a studio image, it's just his version of it, his take on it, really it embodies this whole notion of Mickey Mouse as the emblem of the American spirit. And you see a cheery, energetic, happy-go-lucky guy, and that's, I think, America at its best.
And no accident that the image of Mickey is red, white, and blue, and black.
Well, that's a good point, because if you'll notice, I think the last image in the book, I think illustration 323, is another Warhol. It's a standing figure of Mickey in kind of burnt orange and brown and autumnal colors. And the book designer originally wanted to use that on the cover. And it's kind of off-putting. It's not a Disney company color combination, first of all, with the red pants and all that. But I really did want that cover, as you very insightfully point out, has the red, white, and blue, but in a subtle way, I like to think. Mm-hmm. It's not the same. It's a buff blue. It's a baby blue, not the blue on the Star-Spangled Banner. And so I wanted to communicate that. And I also think it's just a powerful image. I think it really smashed it. I mean, Warhol was a great artist.
Yes, it really is. It's very striking. Now, your book covers the entire career arc, if you want to call it that, the story arc of Mickey Mouse from his early development. And you even start before that. You talk about the early days of the studio. There's a quote from Chuck Jones, the famous animator at Warner Brothers, that you have early in the book. You quote him as saying, "It's easier and more believable to humanize animals than it is to humanize humans." Why is that?
On that page, and I think there's a page or two there, I get into that. And in fact, Walt said the same thing. And it's because, I think Chuck Jones says, if you have a person, you give them a big nose or whatever, you got issues of skin color, they become identifiable. There's something just more universal about a cat or a mouse or a dog that everyone, I think, can relate to. And so it frees the image to be more about the action and the personality of the figure, as opposed to, is it a middle-aged man? Is he Caucasian? Is she this? So on and so forth. And I think that's what they're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Mickey Mouse was created at a time at an offshoot of Walt Disney at his absolute career low. As you know, we all famously know the story of how he had lost the rights to Oswald the Lucky Rabbit and a good deal of his staff on that, famous meeting in New York City, and then slowly developed, or eventually developed, the character of Mickey Mouse on the train ride back from New York. And then, of course, once he got back to the studio, you go to great lengths in your book to explain that specific moment, because it's been subject to a lot of myth making over the years, and some of it even informed by Walt Disney himself. Well, talk about that a little bit. Talk about the myth of the creation of Mickey Mouse versus what reality was.
Well, it is very complicated, and I do go on a great length, maybe greater length than some people would like, and I wish I could have summed it up or digested it in simpler fashion. But it is very complicated. Various people, including Walt and Iwerks, told very different stories. And I set it up as like version 1.0, 2.0, because it evolved over time. No one at the beginning was keeping a diary. There was no video going on to track the progression of how Mickey was created and what happened. So you have to piece it together from recollections years or decades later, from the articles published at such and such a date. And again, it's very complicated. When Mickey was created, well, first of all, I absolutely believe that the idea of a mouse was created on the train. There's some people who still don't believe that, and there's some people who will say, "Oh no, Iwerks came up with it."
Yeah,
no.
Well, he had to have some sort of a seed of an idea because he had just lost his his main character. So obviously he had to be at least thinking about it on the train
and acting on it, because I quote Diane Miller too in the book. Well, what we know about Walt Disney, can you imagine him losing the contract to do, and Oswald wasn't stolen away from him. He had a contract, and they just didn't renew the contract. So he was in a bind when he left New York. And can you imagine Walt Disney, as we know him, on a train for 4 or 5 days, just sitting there sleeping or twiddling his thumbs? He's the boss of the studio. He's got to save what's left, people like Les Clark and Iwerks, and come back with a plan. It's impossible to imagine Walt coming back and saying, "Hey guys, what do you think?" Mm-hmm. Now, he would have wanted their input, but whether or not he came up with the name Mortimer on the train, I'm not so sure, and I'm pretty sure that I'm convinced that Lillian, either on the train or when he got back, said, "No, that's too prissy," and then they came up with, or Walt probably came up with Mickey. But they had been doing mice, mm-hmm. And there are plenty of illustrations in the book as minor characters in the Alice comedies and in the Oswald films. And mice were all over the place, from Crazy Cat to Felix the Cat, the Aesop's Fables by Paul Terry. So it was kind of a logical leap. You couldn't do another cat, you couldn't do another rabbit, so what was left? And they've been doing mice. So it's not like they were starting from scratch, and I just think the only choice was between them. There's that sheet that's in the book, a very famous sheet, the earliest known images of Mickey that are at the Walt Disney Family Foundation. Yes. On display at the museum. Well, you got a choice. It's a binary choice between a Mortimer little Lord Fauntleroy type with pants and a big baggy bow tie, or the Mickey that we see with the barefooted, kind of clawed feet in Plain Crazy, where he has no shoes. And that's a central image on that sheet, circled in blue pencil, and I think that's what they came up with. But the other sketches are of a Mortimer type. Mm-hmm. And that could only have come from Walt. And he loved the name Mortimer, as I point out. There's Morty and Ferdy, the nephews. There's an Uncle Mortimer in the comic strips.
There was a Mortimer mouse that later appeared in one of the Mickey's
rival.
Films.
Yeah, Mickey's rival. So that comes from Walt. That's not Iwerks or anyone else. And so really all Ub did, there may have been other input from him, was execute, help do that. I think he drew that sketch, that sheet, and said, here are the choices. What do you think, Walt? What do you want to do? And they just developed the mouse they'd already been drawing. They just made him bigger. In the book, I have a birthday card to Elias Disney, Walt's father, from him and Roy, with the February, which was Elias' birth month. It's the month of great men, and there's Washington and Lincoln. And Elias, and the only characters on there are a bunch of mice.
Mm-hmm.
What I think it could be a myth about him feeding mice back in Kansas City.
And that was kind of tacked on later. I mean, that was
well, that was part of one of the initial stages of this myth making. When they made Mickey, they had to save the studio. So Walt did not set out to create an iconic figure. No one expected it to be as big as it was. And once it hit it big, they had to start fielding questions from the press and provide stories. So they started cobbling together a story. Oh, well, I wanted a little guy like Charlie Chaplin, or I used to feed mice, and kind of built and got out of control. Plus, there were PR people working in the studio who would have handled a lot of this. A lot of the stories that are published under Walt's name could not have been written by him. And so we know journalists, right? they're never going to let the truth stand in the way of a good story. So,
exactly.
So they, and then once you start going on the record with all of this, you can't say, oh, we had that wrong. So it evolved over time. And one of the things I get into the book is we know that was essential in terms of animating Mickey, making him look like what he looked like. But he is not credited in any of the stories during his lifetime about how Mickey was created. And one of the things I deal with in the book, and I don't think anyone's ever actually confronted itself, is why. And that's because he, in turn, left the studio in 1930, lured away, big career mistake. But he gave up, he owned 20% of the company, he gave it up.
Yeah.
So his heirs today would be very wealthy people otherwise. But Walt felt betrayed. So Ub could not receive credit once he left the studio. His name was on posters and other stuff at the very beginning. But once he left, he couldn't be a part of the myth-making, which developed. And so it's a very complicated story, and there's just a lot of, there's a human side to it. It's not just telling a story from a purely historical point of view. There's a lot of factors that went into why the story of Mickey evolved the way it did. And part of what I try to do is also show images that help reinforce what I'm trying to say with words.
And really, the evolution of Mickey, or the creation of Mickey, in many ways, I mean, it's simplicity itself. Walt wanted and needed a new character. It was going to be an animal character of some sort. He couldn't do a cat because Felix the cat was everywhere, and nobody wanted a new cat character. So you take Oswald's ears, shorten them, round them off a little bit, and you essentially get Mickey Mouse.
Right. Walt captured lightning in a bottle with the design because the circles are magical shapes. Mm-hmm.
The quarter and 2
they don't
times.
have sharp edges, so they're lovable. They're inherently lovable. Even the square has sharp corners. They're not jagged. And so there's that. Of course, they did that in part just because it was easier. At one point, guys were using quarters and dimes to draw the ears and head. Mm-hmm. Because it was just easier. And whatever angle Mickey was on, it was always the same circles, Other details might change. So, again, that was nothing they pre-planned or figured on as being, again, iconic or, universal. They just kind of stumbled into it. But wound up being, I think, along with the personality of Mickey, which to me is very much an extension of Walt's personality, just happened to click. It just came together and gelled, and it was magic.
And how do you really explain that? Because, I mean, there were popular cartoon characters at the time. We mentioned Felix the Cat, and even Oswald the Lucky Rabbit was a fairly successful character when Disney was working on it. But what was it about Mickey Mouse that was so meteoric? I mean, was it just the great timing of being able to do it with sound, or was it something a little bit more different?
Well, that was it. I mean, I think Walt was very lucky to have lost Oswald at just a time when sound is about to come in, and he had the sense or genius to go with it, to fight to do a quality job with the Cinephone system of Pat Powers, and just lucky timing. But also, and Leonard Maltin, among others, stressed this, one of the keys to the early success was music. Not just the synchronization, which Disney pioneered between action and sound, including funny sounds and music, but all the jazz age popular songs that were in there. Some of the early Mickeys are just they're video clips with music. There's no story as such. They're putting on a show or whatever and dancing around and singing, Mickey and Minnie. And so it was just fun. Felix the Cat was a marvelous character and series, but he didn't have that. And I think that's what really established Mickey initially. It's just you go in and you had the 8 or 9, 7 minutes, whatever it was, of just pure delight. And only later then Mickey, of course, developed into more of a personality and a character. Then he got eclipsed by Donald and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and you talk about that evolution a bit in the book, and you show the famous drawing of each version of Mickey over the years drawing the next one. Let's talk a little bit about how the character evolved over the years, and actually in your book you break that down into 4 specific phases or eras. There was, the birth of Mickey and his rise prior to World War II. Then there's this post World War II period where the character kind of levels off, but then gets kind of a resurgence through television, through the Mickey Mouse Club, and then of course Disneyland, and then kind of a rediscovery in the 60s by pop artists, and
right.
Then finally the iconic, more benign, I guess you could say, Mickey Mouse of our current era, although he does step out occasionally in cartoons and video games. But through all this evolution, Mickey went from being rather rambunctious and more adventurous, and he's kind of evolved over the years to kind of this middle class, laid back kind of character. How did that happen? And I mean, was that like the necessary course that Mickey needed to take?
Well, I think isn't that kind of a natural thing in life? I mean, you have birth, maturity, old age, and then eventually you're gone. I mean, Mickey will never die, but I think it's a natural progression. What you're talking about, though, of course, is the Disney images of Mickey. I mean, one of the things I try to point out in the book, and that's why Warhol, but others are in there, is that other non-Disney artists, cartoonists, caricaturists use Mickey often in a negative way or a critical way. And so it escaped the control of Burbank. And that's important to bear in mind. With the company, again, and Walt said it too, that Mickey became such a hit that, Mickey couldn't be a rat, I think he said. And so he had to be a nice, likable guy. And fortunately, they had Donald to sort of be the anti-Mickey, irascible and irritable and all that, and doing the kind of crazy stuff that Mickey used to do in the early days when he was smoking cigarettes and drinking beer in Galloping Gaucho.
That is exactly the image I was just thinking of.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I mean, it's fabulous. Dancing a mean tango with Minnie, and smooching with Minnie and all that, not just a little kiss with the hearts coming out, but pretty passionate, and so. Mickey became a corporate symbol and flagship character. So there wasn't much that Disney could do. I mean, he started wearing full clothing, right? Not just the shorts. He basically became a father and a husband. He lived this very suburban domestic life. I mean, in the early cartoons, he's all over the place, right? He's steamboat and on the pampas of Argentina or wherever. And later, all that changed.
And one of the things you pointed out in his book, your book, is that despite all that, Mickey Mouse never had a full-time job.
Right. Yeah. It seems to be. I think I say it's an iron law of toons that the animals never have full-time jobs. It's somewhat like Fred Flintstone. But also, what happened is, talking about natural progressions. The golden age of the animated cartoon short that Michael Barrier especially has written about declined. So after the war, when also figurative art was displaced by abstract art in the serious art world, these things kind of combined to bring, take the air out of Mickey's balloon as a cartoon character. And as you said, he was saved by the Disneyland show where he was the host, or the Mickey Mouse Club show where he was the host, and then the costumed figure at Disneyland and later Disney World. So by then Walt was turning into live action movies, still doing the feature-length animated cartoons, but things just changed. And so, he's better known from marketing, on Pampers diapers or whatever than for the cartoons. I mean, very few kids today will have actually seen a Mickey Mouse cartoon.
Very true. They'll see maybe something that's been edited on the Disney Channel, although Mickey Mouse short cartoons have made a bit of a resurgence in a stylistic manner that probably we could not have imagined decades ago.
Yeah, there is that. And then periodically the company does try to revive him in some way, but it's not been sustained. It hasn't completely, worked out. So that's why I think in the last, 30 years maybe, he's become a pure icon, both as a symbol of the company, basically, but also as a shorthand reference visually, or even in words, in headlines in newspapers or magazines. He represents the company. And when, sometimes you'll see a magazine, Mickey Mouse, this or that, they're really referring to the company.
Mm-hmm.
But also, if you want to come up with as a cartoonist, an image of America, you can use Uncle Sam or Statue of Liberty, but also Mickey Mouse. I mean, I have some of those in the book. I have a Michael Ramirez cartoon, Obama holding a little girl with mouse ears on, talking about free stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's what that is. And there's a photo of Madonna in there with mouse ears on. I guess it's a mini mouse.
Yeah, she's got the little polka dot bow on.
Yeah. I mean, this is stuff that that's not the Disney company's Mickey. It's something that represents something else. It's, as I say, not often all that favorable.
Mm-hmm.
Often just for fun too, I think that people like Warhol just love drawing Mickey. Warhol was a huge, I say in the book, his brother remembers it. As a kid, he would just run Mickey Mouse cartoons on the wall. He was born in 28, just like Mickey, Andy was. And so he was just fascinated by Mickey and other things.
As was Maurice Sendak, who you
Exactly.
also show in the book.
Maurice Sendak and David Levine, who was a character in there, Walt as the mouse, in the introduction with a mouse tail on, holding a giant pencil, was one of the great caricatures. He did Newsweek covers, the New York Review of Books particularly. He did drawings of historical figures, literary figures. And both David Levine and Maurice Sendak, as kids, like 8, 10 years old, applied to the Disney company to be cartoonists. And at that time, they would send you back. They didn't know who they were or what age they were, so they would send them back an application there telling them to draw this or that, kind of a test. And I think David Levine was even offered a job as a kid. And Maurice Sendak apparently wrote to Walt asking him to adopt him and hire him. And I think what's interesting, too, those are both, of course, Jewish cartoonists. And, this whole anti-Semitic thing that people occasionally bring up. And, they loved Disney. So they died. And they would have picked up on Walt being really fundamentally anti-Semitic if he was. They were pretty smart people tuned into the culture. So I think that's very interesting.
Well, I have always found it fascinating that, despite all that talk, I think it was a chapter of B'nai B'rith in Los Angeles had given Walt Disney a Man of the Year award in the 1950s. And they just wouldn't have done that to someone who's anti-Semitic.
No, they wouldn't have.
As we talk about, the various, iterations of Mickey over the decades, and this is something that you also discuss in your book, every generation kind of gets their own version of Mickey that they identify with. So people that grew up prior or during to World War II know Mickey Mouse almost exclusively from short cartoons. If you were a baby boomer, it was all about the Mickey Mouse Club and Disneyland. And really that was kind of my introduction to Mickey. I was a little late to be a baby boomer, so the Mickey Mouse Club isn't a really vivid memory for me, but the Mickey that I identify with is the one that was at Disneyland. Mm-hmm. Which Mickey Mouse did you first notice and embrace?
That's interesting because I'm sort of a baby boomer, maybe just a little bit before. So I remember the Mickey Mouse Club. And I had mixed feelings about it. I didn't much care for the Mouseketeers with those silly turtleneck shirts with their names on them. And none of those kids seemed to appeal to me. I didn't even care that much for Annette. to my
oh,
shame,
that's blasphemy.
Yeah, I know. What kind of red-blooded American boy? But And I didn't much care for Jimmy Dodd or Roy Williams. I just thought the thing was kind of corny. What I liked was occasionally they would show the old cartoons. And that was probably the only, other than maybe at the movies as a kid, my family didn't take me to the movies very much. I mean, I'm pretty sure I saw the Ichabod, Sleepy Hollow and Mr. Toad package film and Snow White when they were re-released. And I had some little Capitol 45 record sets of the Three Little Pigs and things like that, which I loved. So I wasn't that much into Mickey. I was just aware of him. You know, he's sort of like wallpaper, in your life. I wasn't a fan. I mean, if I was a fan of Disney, it would have been of, say, Uncle Scrooge in the comic books, or the Donald Duck comics, or as I say, Mr. Toad. I loved Mr. Toad. But, had a positive vibe about Mickey. And again, I don't know, when I first saw him, well, I must have seen some of the old Mickeys on the TV show, the Mickey Mouse Club show, because I know they showed them now and then. And I used to watch Farmer Alfalfa, Paul Terry cartoons on TV. They used to be run on TV back in the 50s.
Now, how did you go from there to now having written 2 books about Mickey Mouse?
Well, it's probably a long story, but I always wanted to be a cartoonist. In fact, 2 things in common with Walt. I was a paper boy, and I wanted to be a political cartoonist as a kid. So as a cartoonist, I don't know, I was attracted to Disney, so I would save things, clippings, magazines. I bought the Richard Schickel biography when it came out. I think the earliest book I remember buying was a paperback version of Diane Disney Miller and Pete Martin's biography. Mm-hmm. Like 25 cents or something, a Dell paperback. And so I was always aware of these things, save things away. And in '97, I did a talk at an academic convention of art historians on the meaning of Mickey Mouse, and that's what eventually led to the book. I thought originally it was going to be a very easy kind of an essay with illustrations, and then as I started researching it and working on it, I realized there's a lot more here than I suspected, and it took a long time to get the book done, and in retrospect, if I'd known how long and hard it would be, I might not have done it.
What do you think the future holds for Mickey Mouse? We've gone from his early days and his meteoric rise to his iconic status now. How do you think future generations are going to identify with Mickey Mouse?
Well, I think he will continue to be this emblematic figure as part of the cartoonist illustrators will use him. A lot depends on the Mickey Mouse copyright law and when the character falls in the public domain, because I can
Disney
easily
continues
imagine,
to fight that.
Well, yeah, they will, and I don't know how far that can go, but can you imagine if, there's a lot of animation and CGI going on, and I can imagine people doing their own version of Mickey, mm-hmm. which who knows where that could lead. So I think in terms of artistry or filmmaking, that's, unless the Disney company can find some way to, and they keep trying to revive the character, the old system of short cartoons with feature films at the movie theaters doesn't exist anymore. You'd have to, have a TV show or a, online show or something. But aside from that, and the fact that like Uncle Sam or whatever, he's going to remain a figure visually among cartoonists and so forth. If he falls in the public domain and people develop him, well, maybe there'll be some surprises.
But otherwise, he'll just kind of keep going like he's going.
Yeah, I think the phase 4 looks like it's going to be there for a while. One where he's just out there as this symbolic character. The earlier, more dynamic stages are probably never going to happen again.
He'll never be new and innovative like he was in 1928.
Yeah, well, life moves on, and nothing is fixed forever. I mean, it's amazing that he's lasted this long, and that he is probably the supreme iconic figure in our culture. That's amazing in and of itself.
Well, the book is Mickey Mouse, Emblem of the American Spirit. It's published by the Walt Disney Family Foundation Press. You can order it on Amazon. I expect you can also purchase it at the Walt Disney Family Museum and find booksellers everywhere. Garry Apgar, always a pleasure to have you on the show, sir. Thank you so much for spending time with us today in the Mouse Castle Lounge.
Well, thank you. I was happy to talk to you. Thank you.
We are introducing a new segment to the Mouse Castle Lounge because we talk a lot about the Mouse Castle, but we don't talk a lot about the lounge, and the lounge has its own resident mixologist. I bet you did not know that. I would like to introduce to you right now a cocktail expert, a divine goddess of alcoholic beverages, and actually a fun person to hang around. Our resident mixologist, Carolyn, who will take us on a voyage through liquid space. Hi, Carolyn.
Hey there, Tim. Thank you so much for that glowing introduction. I have a lot to live up to now.
Was that a little bit over the top?
It was, but I'm happy for it. Thank you.
Okay. Well, now you have a reputation to live up to. I've given you all that build up, so no pressure. Now you need to deliver. And what this is all about is Carolyn and I have been friends for a long time and share a common like for alcoholic beverages, which is a prerequisite if you're going to hang out in the lounge with us.
And hang out with him.
And hang out with me. And but Carolyn knows a lot of stuff. And I mean, not just how to mix a good drink, but I mean, things like cocktail theory and history and all this stuff. And I thought it would be fun to introduce it to the show. And with that in mind, Carolyn, what did you bring with you today?
Today, I thought we would talk about a more classic cocktail, and one they serve at Carthay, but I don't know that a lot of people probably order it. It is the Negroni. I know I asked you if you had a Negroni, and
no, I had not, because it has gin in it, and I am not a fan of gin. So to make an impression on your first segment in the Mouse Castle Lounge, you come up with a cocktail with ingredients that I'm not a fan of.
But you absolutely hate, yes. But you know what? I think this should be an exploration, as the title is Adventure Through Liquid Space. So you should delve into things that you don't normally drink and try things you would normally stay away from, because there are a lot of fantastic cocktails out there.
Okay, I am not a gin drinker, and I will admit that one time you took me to Napa Rose at the Grand Californian and introduced me to the tremendous bartenders they have behind the bar there. And the name of the gentleman who did it escapes me, but he did manage to make me a gin cocktail that I actually enjoyed. Now, and I will enjoy a drink with gin in it as long as I can't taste the gin, because I cannot stand that kind of medicinal flavor. Now, how does that play into a Negroni?
Since you don't like gin, it might even be interesting for you to go back to the drink that kind of spawned the Negroni. It's a drink called the Americano, and it is Campari, sweet vermouth, and soda water, where the Negroni is Campari, sweet vermouth, and gin. The Americano, if you ever do order it from a bar, make sure they know it's not the coffee drink, the Americano.
Yeah, Cafe Americano is a little bit different.
So for you at least, if you'd like to try a Negroni-like drink, but hate gin, the Americano is a good place to start. The gin really, I don't want to say that it changes the flavor dramatically, but it really does give it a backbone, because the gin that you use in a Negroni does help if it is a stronger gin, a beefier gin, a chewier one. So it does make a difference what gin you're using.
And what gin would you recommend then? Or since we're talking about the fact that they serve this at the Carthay Circle at Disney California Adventure, what gin do they use in their Negroni?
They use Beefeater, and Beefeater is a gin that I don't actually have I didn't have on hand at home, but for the purposes of this podcast, I did make a run to Total Wine yesterday and picked up a bottle. I picked up a few other bottles too.
That's research in the field, people.
I take this seriously. I do. And I did my own little taste test yesterday and probably had a little too much Negroni for one evening. But, they use Beefeater. And I was suspicious because I usually would order a Negroni with Bombay Sapphire, because quality in the spirit, I think, does make a difference. There are people out there who will say, when you're talking about a mixed drink, it really doesn't matter what kind of base spirit you're using, because the other flavors are going to mess it up and you're not going to be able to appreciate a high quality spirit. But I think they're full of it. So I usually do order it with Bombay Sapphire. I wasn't sure about the Beefeater, but I think it makes a very good Negroni because it is a little more fiery. I bought a bottle of Nolet Silver, which I believe they also have at Carthay, and that gin has a very floral nose and a lot of fruit flavors, and I thought that it would work very well in the Negroni because the Campari has a bit of a citrus taste, but it really got lost and ended up making a Negroni that is far too sweet. So I think Beefeater, if you order just the standard Carthay Negroni, you're going to get a good Negroni.
And now for people who want to try to make this at home, how much of each ingredient goes into the drink?
This one is super easy. It is just equal parts of everything. So equal parts gin, sweet vermouth, and Campari.
I can do that.
So very easy to make at home. Carthay serves it over ice. Other places will say to shake it with ice and serve with an orange peel, strain and serve with an orange peel. I kind of like it with ice. The drink can be strong and sweet, which is strange because if you've never had Campari before, right?
I have not.
Okay, Campari is certainly a unique and distinct flavor. It is bitter, but it is also very sweet.
It's bittersweet. It brings a tear to my eye.
It is bright red. I know you don't like the medicinal, but it looks and has kind of the texture of cough syrup. It's bright red and kind of syrupy.
Boy, you're making me want to have this drink more and more.
I know this drink is like the anti-Kim drink. For, if I was going to choose one drink that you would probably hate, it's Negroni. But, who knows? Maybe
I'm going to have to try it now. I'm going to have to, how sometimes you'll watch a TV show that you can't stand because you'll hate watch it. I'm going to hate drink this drink, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And believe me, if you have enough of them, I think you'll learn to like them.
Isn't that true of
one way or the other?
Drink, every cocktail? Well, a Negroni, gin, Campari, sweet vermouth, easy to make.
Yeah, it is. Super easy.
And, okay, you talked me into it. If I can't stand it, we're going to talk about this next week. You know that, right? Well, Carolyn, thank you, my dear. We will catch you again next time. And cheers.
Yes, thank you for having me, and bottoms up.
And that will do it for this edition of the Mouse Castle Lounge. Thank you to Garry Apgar for being my guest. Stay up to date with everything going on in the Mouse Castle Lounge. Subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud. And I'm happy to say that the Mouse Castle is now featured on Clammr, that's CLAMMR, where you can find and share the best audio from your favorite podcasts. You can also download the free Mouse Castle Lounge app, which you can get right now by going to themousecastle.com and clicking Get the App. Anthony Reynolds and I host Inside the Mouse Castle with your weekly dose of Disney news, information, and commentary. Do give us a listen. The Mouse Castle Lounge is not affiliated with the Walt Disney Company. I just like to talk about them. I'm Tim Calloway. It's been a blast as always, so let's do this again real soon. Take care.